From the Memoirs of Dr. Johann Friedrich Albrecht, personal physician to the House of Euler, 1732 to 1783. Found among the private papers of Dr. Johann, edges brittle with age. A small, pressed flower fell from between two pages, its colour faded to a ghostly blue. St. Petersburg, June 28, 1732. My hands still tremble as I commit these words to paper, hours later. Not from the chill of the evening, for the fire in my hearth burns bright. No, this tremor originates deeper, in the marrow of my spirit, a disquietude instilled by the incandescent presence of Leonhard Euler. He came to me today to treat a headache about my age, a young man of barely 25, yet his eyes, those startlingly lucid eyes, seemed to carry the ancient weight of stars, the burning light of a mind that had already journeyed to the far frontiers of human understanding. He had been steeped in the formidable intellect of the Bernoullis, and it showed. He spoke, not of youthful dalliances or worldly ambitions, but of the very fabric of reality, of infinite series, of the constant which he was beginning to tame, its paradoxical nature mirroring his own complex soul. His voice, a low, urgent thrum, wove theorems like incantations, painting vistas of logic so profound, so terrifyingly beautiful, they seemed to emanate from a place beyond mortal ken. "Friedrich," he implored, his grip on my arm almost painful, a desperate anchoring to the mundane as his thoughts soared. What if this universe, in all its intricate glory, is but mathematics weeping? What if every equation, every exquisitely balanced prime, is not a law, but a lament, God's eternal, desperate attempt to articulate his own unbearable, infinite loneliness? He stared into the flames, yet I knew he was not seeing the dance of earthly fire, but the cold, burning calculus of the cosmos. Did I glimpse a prophet in that moment, or a man teetering on the precipice of an abyss of understanding too vast, too desolate for any single human soul to bear? He spoke of God's loneliness, but I saw in his eyes the profound, terrifying solitude of a mind that had already voyaged far beyond the shores of common human thought, carrying his genius like a sacred, heavy burden. I, a humble physician, tethered to the tangible frailties of flesh and bone, could only offer the weak tea of conventional solace. But the die was cast. I saw then the terrible, immutable contract of genius, to see further, to know more, but to walk forever in a landscape unseen by others, a summit both glorious and devastatingly, unutterably alone. St. Petersburg, May 2nd, 1734. Katerina Gesell, his cherished wife of a mere 5 months, screamed for 18 hours. 18 hours that stretched into an eternity, each cry a raw, jagged tear in the fabric of the day, echoing through the stark stone halls of their St. Petersburg dwelling. My medical skills, my potions and reassurances, were as chaff before this primal storm of creation. And Leonhard, my God, Leonhard! He knelt beside the birthing bed, his face a mask of chiselled anguish, yet his lips moved, not in prayer, but in a whispered litany of numbers. He was calculating, always calculating, the diminishing probabilities of her survival, the rising likelihood of the child's demise, the brutal intersection of biological variables. He, who had just this past year, with an almost casual brilliance, unveiled his solution to the Basel problem to the astounded Academy, an elegant, divine harmony that had eluded the greatest minds for decades, was now confronted by the messy, agonizing, imperfect calculus of life itself. Was this a desperate attempt to master the unmasterable, to impose the sanity of numbers upon the raw, screaming madness of existence? His innovative notation, Fx, could define the most ethereal curve with grace, but it could not chart this trajectory of suffering, nor alleviate its brutal course. "Stop counting, Leonhard," I finally hissed, my own composure shattered. "For the love of God, man, feel this. Pray. Be present in this horror with her." He turned to me, his eyes wide, unseeing, like shattered glass reflecting a distant, frozen star. A single tear traced a path through the grime and sweat on his cheek. "I cannot stop, Friedrich," he rasped, his voice a fragile thing. "The numbers, they are a bulwark. If I stop calculating, if I let the raw feeling of this biological chaos in—" He shuddered violently, the unspoken terror convulsing him. "If I start feeling, I might shatter." He was trying to weave a shield of logic against the irrational agony of life. When their firstborn, Johann Albrecht, finally emerged, a fragile, blue-tinged scrap of humanity, his breath a hesitant flutter, the silence that descended was more deafening than all the preceding screams. Leonhard, the titan who wrestled with infinities and bent them to his will, who saw the universe as an ordered symphony, simply crumpled against the wall, a broken marionette. He had peered into the crucible of creation and found it governed not by the elegant, predictable logic he worshipped, but by a force that seemed capricious, wasteful, and breathtakingly cruel. He had glimpsed the gears of the universe, but now he saw blood on those gears. The child lived, a flickering candle in a vast darkness. But in that moment I witnessed something vital extinguish within Leonhard, some innocent, fiercely held faith in the inherent benevolence of the universe's grand design, some belief that its beauty was matched by its goodness, died in that birthing room. The numbers, he was beginning to perceive with a clarity that chilled me, could explain how with exquisite precision, but they remained terrifyingly, eternally silent on the question of why. St. Petersburg, February 14th, 1741. Carl Johann is dead. His second male child, snatched away before his first year had run its course. This is the third time Leonhard and Katerina have stood at the abyss of a tiny grave. First Anna Elizabeth, then Maria Magdalena, now their little Carl. My pen hovers, unwilling to form the words. How does a man who converses with infinity, who plumbs the depths of eternity with his equations, process such finite, brutal endings, repeated like a flawed, cruel calculation by an indifferent cosmos? Each loss chips away another piece of him, leaving him more exposed to the chilling winds of desolation. The fever came like a vengeful spirit, swift and merciless. Leonhard, his face a mask of desperate concentration, worked beside me. He applied cold cloths with the same meticulous, unwavering precision he used when deriving the theorems in his monumental Mechanica, or when he elegantly unravelled the 7 bridges of Königsberg, transforming a local curiosity into the foundation of graph theory. He could chart the forces that moved planets and solve the riddles of earthly pathways, but he could not chart a course away from this relentless grief, nor bridge the chasm death tore in his heart. His right eye, already a casualty of a fever and ceaseless work some 3 years prior, throbbed with sympathetic pain, a constant reminder of his own body's frailty in the face of his mind's boundless ambition. "The differential equation of his temperature decline, Friedrich," he muttered, his voice hoarse, almost a stranger to my ears. "If we can model the heat dissipation, if we map the variables, there must be a solution." "Leonhard," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears, my hand on his trembling shoulder. "Some variables are beyond our ken. He is in God's hands now." He recoiled as if burned. "God's hands," he whispered, his gaze, one clear eye and one clouded, flicking from the small, stilling form to his useless charts. "Then God's hands are not the gentle cradle of a loving father, but the indifferent mechanism of a cosmic clockmaker who does not weep when his creations falter." The child had died at 3:17 in the morning. Leonhard, his face illuminated by the flickering candlelight, stared at his pocket watch, its relentless ticking an affront to the stillness in the room. When the last shallow breath faded into nothingness, he continued to stare, as if by sheer force of will he could compel time to reverse, to undo this unbearable finality. He fled to his numbers, his only constant companions in a world of bewildering loss. But did he find solace there, or merely a colder, more structured, more terrifyingly indifferent form of despair? "In mathematics," he finally rasped, his voice an echo from a cavern of grief, "nothing beautiful ever truly vanishes. It transforms. It finds a new expression, a new resonance in a different octave of truth." He gestured to the small, swaddled body. This is not transformation, Friedrich. This is annihilation, an erasure from the book of being." His right eye, once a beacon of intellect, was now clouded with a sorrow so profound it seemed to suck the light from the room. The shadow was falling, not just upon his sight, but upon his soul. Berlin, September 19th, 1741. The summons from Frederick II of Prussia offered a geographical escape from the grief-saturated air of St. Petersburg, but there is no outrunning the shadows that cling to a wounded heart. Berlin's court was a dazzling spectacle of artifice, a glittering cage of ambition and whispered lies. Leonhard, his fame a heavy cloak, moved through it like a sombre ghost, his singular genius an uncomfortable, almost reproachful presence amidst the shimmering superficiality. His right eye was now a milky ruin, and the king, with a careless cruelty that defined his court, occasionally jested, "Ah, my mathematical cyclops!" The king, a man who collected intellects as other monarchs collected jewels, paraded him as "my mathematical genius." I saw Leonhard's spirit flinch, recoiling from the possessive claim, the reduction of his vast inner world to a mere curiosity. He found little kinship in the endless, fashionable philosophizing of Voltaire and the king's other intimates, their easy skepticism a jarring counterpoint to his own deeply ingrained Calvinist faith, a faith now battered and bruised, but still clinging to the wreckage of his hopes. He, who perceived God's intricate glory in the precise ballet of planetary orbits and the subtle architecture of a prime number, felt an acute alienation from their glib dismissals of the divine. His theorems conquered minds, but his soul wandered, a ghost in the machine of his own intellect. At a state dinner, a bejewelled duchess, her laughter like shattering crystal, leaned towards him with a predatory smile. "Oh, Herr Euler, do enthrall us. Perform some of your enchanting mathematics for our amusement. Something dazzling." A flicker of profound, heart-breaking sadness crossed Leonhard's face, a rictus that never touched his eyes. He began to recite, his voice a low, steady monotone, the digits of pi, the very symbol he had championed into common mathematical parlance. 100, 200, 300 decimal places cascaded into the polished silence of the grand salon. The courtiers, initially intrigued by the novelty, soon grew bored, then restless, then vaguely unsettled by this unending stream of pure, unadulterated number. Each digit, I knew, was a shield, a brick in the wall he built around his ravaged heart, but also a tear shed for a world that could not see the universe of equations burning within him, only the curious performance of its surface. He was finding elegant relations in his polyhedral formula, V minus E plus F equals 2, a divine geometry in abstract forms. If only life's intractable dimensions, love, loss, joy, sorrow, would yield to such elegant simplification. Later, in the sanctuary of my modest rooms, the carefully constructed dam of his composure finally broke. The great Leonhard Euler, whose mind spanned galaxies of thought, collapsed into my arms and wept, not the quiet tears of resignation, but the raw, racking sobs of a man utterly broken by the collision of his sublime inner world with the brutal realities of the outer. "They want me to juggle numbers like a trained bear, Friedrich," he choked out, his body trembling. "They admire the edifice of my thought, but they have no conception of the cost of its construction, the sacrifices laid upon its altar. Bears, at least, are allowed to roar their grief. I must only produce elegance, while my soul lies in ruins." Berlin, March 8, 1754. The insidious dimming continues. The light in his remaining good eye, his precious left, is now unmistakably failing, not with the drama of sudden injury, but with the slow, relentless creep of a cataract, a mordant jest from fate for a man who had penned treatises on optics, who had dissected the very nature of light and colour in his Nova Theoria Lucis et Colorum. The master of light now pursued by encroaching, inescapable shadows. The dread in him is a palpable thing, a cold serpent coiling in the pit of his stomach. I found him in his study, a cavernous room overflowing with the spoor of his restless intellect, papers strewn like fallen leaves, drafts for his definitive institutions, calculi differentialis piled high. He was pressing the heel of his hand against his left temple, a low groan escaping his lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated physical and spiritual agony. The script on his pages, I noted with a pang, was growing larger, bolder, a desperate accommodation to his fading vision. "I cannot see the right side of the equation clearly any more, Friedrich," he stated, his voice imbued with a terrible, preternatural calm that was far more frightening than any outburst of despair. He meant, of course, the symbols perceived by his left, his seeing eye. The elegant curves of the symbols dissolve into a grey, meaningless mist. Soon, perhaps, I will only see the equations in the dark theatre of my mind. Perhaps this is God's design, to wean me from the distractions of the sensory world, to force my gaze inward, to contemplate only the pure, unadorned skeleton of abstract truth. But his voice trembled on the word truth, as if questioning its ultimate solace. The darkness was gathering, not as a sudden storm, but as an inexorable tide. He responded with a desperate, almost frantic surge of productivity. It was as if he were racing against the dying of his own light, frantically trying to transcribe the teeming universe of equations that bloomed in his mind before eternal night descended. Katerina, his steadfast rock, found him one evening, his great head bowed over a complex geometric proof, silent tears streaming from his one functioning eye, tracing glistening paths down his weary, deeply lined face. And I understood then, with a clarity that stole my breath, that his tears were not merely for the loss of his physical sight. They were tears of anticipatory grief for every perfect, luminous theorem he would never see committed to paper by his own hand, every elegant, harmonious formula that would exist only in the vibrant, burgeoning darkness of his extraordinary mind. Would his inner world of equations become his sole reality? A universe of perfect forms, yes, but one devoid of his children's evolving faces, Katerina's loving gaze? What price for such intellectual purity? Beauty requires witnesses, Friedrich, he confided in me later, his voice thick with a sorrow that was almost palpable. What worth is mathematical beauty if I am the only soul to perceive its form, and soon I will see nothing at all. It will be a universe unseen, a song unheard in the vast, silent auditorium of my own skull. If a theorem falls in the forest of a blind mind, Friedrich, does it make a sound? Does its beauty truly exist if it cannot be shared, validated by another human eye, another comprehending spirit? Yet, even as this dread consumed him, he began, with characteristic resilience, to train his sons, particularly the diligent Johann Albrecht, to act as his amanuenses, his scribes, his borrowed eyes. His mind, a brilliant, unquenchable sun, would radiate its light, even if he himself could no longer see its earthly illumination. St. Petersburg, January 12, 1766. We returned to St. Petersburg, summoned by the insistent, flattering overtures of Catherine the Great. A change of sovereigns, a change of city, but the old, familiar spectre of loss stalked us still. Another child gone. Not an infant this time, which somehow made the blow heavier, the theft more cruel. I use the name Carl Friedrich here in my chronicle not to denote a specific child, but as an emblem for the crushing, cumulative weight of these repeated bereavements. 4 of his 13 children, born of Katerina's womb, only 5 would live to see their own adulthood. 8 small graves scattered across the indifferent earth of Europe. 13 times the miracle of birth, 8 times the desolation of death. What divine algorithm, what celestial calculation governed such a cruel and heartbreaking tally? This latest, a promising boy of 15, devoured by pneumonia. For 3 harrowing days and nights, Leonhard was a whirlwind of desperate activity, oscillating between tender, clumsy nursing, his large mathematician's hands surprisingly gentle as he bathed his son's fevered brow, and frantic, almost manic calculation. He filled page after page with equations, algebraic incantations, as if he could somehow distill an elixir of life from the alembic of pure reason, as if he could solve his son's encroaching mortality like some complex differential equation. On the final terrible night, as the boy's breath became a shallow, ragged whisper, a mere flutter against the vast silence of the approaching end, Leonhard finally, definitively, pushed aside his papers. The equations lay abandoned, symbols of his ultimate impotence in the face of this implacable, biological foe. He gathered his dying son into his arms and simply held him. For 12 unbroken hours, the greatest mathematical mind of the age, the man who danced with infinities and mapped the heavens, did nothing but cradle his child, rocking him gently, and whisper fragments of forgotten Swiss lullabies, his voice hoarse and trembling, the simple melodies fractured by unspeakable grief. The boy died at dawn, as the first pale, indifferent light of a St. Petersburg winter seeped into the hushed room. With him, something essential, something foundational in Leonhard, also died. He fumbled for a piece of paper, and with a hand that shook so violently it could barely hold the chalk, he wrote, his sight almost entirely extinguished now, guided by the muscle memory of a lifetime spent in the service of symbols. E⁻I pi plus 1 equals 0. He pressed the slate into my hand, his face a ruin of devastation. "This," he said, his voice hollow, devoid of all inflection, like dust sifting through an ancient tomb. "This is perfect. The 5 most fundamental constants of the universe, E, the soul of growth, I, the ghost of reality, pi, the song of the circle, 1, the beginning of all things, and zero, the void from which all emerges and to which all returns, united in a single, exquisitely beautiful, utterly simple expression. The only true perfection I will ever achieve. A terrible pause. And Carl will never know. He will never understand that his father, in his darkest hour, could still touch the face of this terrible, indifferent beauty. He had known this identity for many years, of course, since its stunning appearance in his 1748 introductio, but in this moment of ultimate human failure, it felt like both a sacred monument and a cruel, glittering mockery. Did it whisper of an underlying order, a harmony beyond the veil of tears? Or did it mock him with its cold, passionless perfection, its utter indifference to the rending of a father's heart? His sight was now a mere memory. A cataract operation in 71, performed with trembling hope, had briefly, miraculously, parted the darkness, only for infection to snatch away that fragile gift, plunging him into an almost total, irreversible blindness. Yet, paradoxically, his intellectual output, his sheer creative force, seemed to increase, as if his mind, freed from the distractions of the visible world, now burned with an even fiercer, more concentrated flame. He dictated complex treatises on mechanics, on algebra, and his monumental, prize-winning work on lunar theory, a work that could predict the moon's fickle dance with breathtaking accuracy, but could not illuminate the darkness in his own heart, nor stay the relentless tide of his personal sorrow. "I can prove God exists mathematically, Friedrich," he whispered to me one evening, his sightless eyes staring into a distance only he could perceive, great, silent tears rolling down the deeply etched furrows of his cheeks. "I can demonstrate his logic, his infinite intelligence, in the very warp and woof of creation. His mind is a symphony of equations." He paused, his voice breaking. "But I cannot prove that God is good. I cannot find the equation for mercy. I cannot locate compassion in the calculus of the cosmos." This was the agonizing dissonance that tore at his soul. His intellect affirmed a master mathematician. His ravaged heart cried out against an absent, silent father. St. Petersburg, October 25th, 1773. Katerina, his Katerina. She died in her sleep, they said, peacefully. His companion of nearly 4 tumultuous decades, the mother of his 13 children, the unwavering anchor that had held his extraordinary, often tempestuous, spirit tethered to the shores of humanity. With her, the last accessible embers of Leonard's capacity for simple, unalloyed human joy seemed to turn to ash. She had been the syntax to his sprawling sentences of thought, the gentle, predictable rhythm beneath his complex, often overwhelming, fugues of logic. Without her, I feared his music might become entirely untethered, too rarefied, too abstract for any human ear to truly hear. I arrived to find him sitting motionless, a graven statue of grief, beside her cold, still body. His blind eyes were fixed on some point beyond the room, beyond sight, perhaps beyond the veil of life itself. His hands, those incredible hands that had transcribed the secret language of the universe, were folded in his lap with a supernatural, almost terrifying stillness. He had been sitting thus for 6 hours, a solitary sentinel at the desolate gates of his own deepest bereavement. "She was the only person, Friedrich," he said, his voice flat, devoid of all inflection, as I quietly entered the room of shadows. "The only one who truly loved the man, the flawed human being, Leonard, rather than the mathematician, the celebrated intellect." She would stride into my study, heedless of the most profound calculations, the most intricate proofs, even as I wrestled with the very equations that govern the flow of fluids or laid the foundations for the calculus of variations, to announce with cheerful authority that supper was ready, and that I was in imminent danger of burning the stew of my own overwrought mind. A faint ghost of a smile touched his lips. She grounded me, Friedrich. Her laughter, the warmth of her hand, the sheer, unarguable reality of her presence. These were more precious to me than any theorem, any accolade. 3 years later, in the autumn of 1776, he married Salome Abigail Gesell, Katerina's own half-sister, a kind, capable woman who managed his household with quiet devotion, creating a semblance of order that allowed him to continue his astonishing, almost inhuman, output of work. But the passionate fire of his earlier life was banked, reduced to a gentle, melancholic glow. He became, in those final years, a living monument to his own towering genius, his mind a ceaseless, inexhaustible fountain of mathematical works, nearly a paper a week, dictated to his surviving sons and assistants from the darkness of his sightless world. Was he trying to outrun death, to fill the void of his losses with an ever-expanding universe of theorems, to build a fortress of thought so vast, so intricate, it would obscure the gaping tomb within his heart? Or was it simply all that was left to him, the tireless, habitual spinning of his magnificent, deeply wounded mind? His letters to a German princess, completed not long before Katerina's death, had been a testament to his unwavering desire to share the order and beauty he perceived in God's creation. But now that order felt like a cold, distant constellation, beautiful but offering little warmth to a man shivering in the winter of his grief. St. Petersburg, September 18th, 1783. Leonhard Euler, my friend, my burden, my beacon, died today. He was 76 years old. He died, as he had lived, calculating. Of course. How else could such a mind that was an infinity machine of thought, cease its relentless motion? I was with him in those final moments, a privilege I shall carry as both a sacred treasure and an unhealing wound to my approaching grave. He had been in remarkably good spirits for much of the day, his intellect still diamond-sharp, his curiosity undimmed. He had played with his giggling grandson, Johann Albrecht's child, with a touching, automatic affection. He had engaged in a lively discussion with his academician colleague, Lexell, concerning the complex calculations for the orbit of the newly discovered planet Uranus, his mind eagerly grasping the challenge. Earlier, I am told, he had even sketched out some preliminary ideas for calculating the physics of the Montgolfier brothers' astonishing invention, the hot air balloon, his imagination still capable of taking flight. Then, over afternoon tea, as he was relating an anecdote, he stopped, mid-sentence. His face, already pale with age and infirmity, became ashen. He pressed his hand to his temple, a gesture I knew with dreadful familiarity, a flicker not of pain, but of something else entirely. Awe, recognition, terror. "Friedrich," he gasped, his voice suddenly faint, a mere thread of sound. His blind eyes widened, as if seeing something truly unimaginable, something not of this world. He gestured vaguely towards the slate where moments before he had been idly chalking figures. "The pipe is out," he murmured, a common phrase, yet laden now with an ultimate finality. Or perhaps he said, "I cease to calculate, and I cease to live. My memory, besieged by the shock of the moment, offers conflicting accounts. What is it, Leonhard? What do you see?" I urged, leaning closer, my own heart constricting with a terrible premonition. "Everything," he whispered, and in that single word there was a universe of profound, unearthly resonance. Finally, everything. A small, almost imperceptible sigh escaped his lips, like a mariner, after a lifetime of tempestuous voyaging, finally sighting a shore too vast, too strange for any mortal map. Then he slumped back in his chair, and the greatest, most luminous, most relentlessly questing mind in human history went silent forever. The world felt dimmer, as if a central sun had been extinguished, leaving us all in a colder, poorer light. But here is the truth that will haunt my remaining days and stalk the corridors of my dreams, in that final revelatory moment, as he whispered of seeing everything. His face was not peaceful. It was not serene. It was etched with an expression of profound, almost ecstatic awe, as if, in that ultimate glimpse, he had not found the gentle guard of his childhood faith, but something far more vast, more elemental, more terrifyingly beautiful and indifferent. Did he see the entirety of mathematical truth, a landscape of such infinite, inhuman complexity that it dwarfed all mortal concerns, all human notions of good and evil, love and loss? Or did he glimpse the final, cold, unyielding equation of existence itself, a formula for oblivion that even his transcendent genius could not refute or soften? I shall never know. Geneva, March 21st, 1790. 7 years. 7 long years have unspooled since Leonhard departed this realm of shadows and suffering. I find myself old, weary, and I too am dying, not of any discernible malady of the flesh, but of the accumulated, crushing weight of a life spent in orbit around such an incandescent, tormented star, a life spent witnessing so much sublime brilliance so inextricably intertwined with such fathomless, unrelenting sorrow. The human heart, I have come to understand, can only bear so much light, so much darkness, before it, too, begins to fail. I attended a celebration today, here in Geneva, for Johann Albrecht Euler, now a distinguished physicist in his own right, his father's intellectual heir. He carries the formidable legacy with a quiet grace. 5. Only 5 of Leonhard's 13 children survived to adulthood, to carry his name into the future. 8. 8 small, silent graves scattered across the face of Europe, each a stark, irrefutable theorem of loss that even the great Leonhard, with all his godlike intellect, could never solve, never reconcile, never truly transcend. I think of him constantly, this colossus of thought, this frail human being, the man who gifted us the language of E and I and F, X, who bridged the unbridgeable at Königsberg, who unveiled the elegant secret of polyhedra, whose equations describe the dance of the heavens and the subtle flow of earthly waters, the man who unified mathematics as no one before him, and in doing so broke his own heart against the unyielding, jagged edges of human existence. He could prove the existence of infinity with breathtaking, almost casual, elegance, but he could not conjure a formula to prove that love survives the gaping maw of death, or that meaning endures beyond the grave. He could calculate the orbit of the most distant planet, chart the intricate motions of the capricious moon, but he could never, it seemed, successfully navigate the simple, treacherous, longed-for geography of human happiness. The tragedy of Leonhard Euler was not his blindness, though that was a cruel blow. It was not the indifference of kings or the shallowness of courtiers. It was not even the relentless succession of his personal losses, devastating as they were. No, the true tragedy was this. His intellect was so vast, his perception so acute, that he could see with excruciating, unbearable clarity the sublime beauty, the divine order, the intricate, breathtaking harmony that underpins the universe. and yet his heart was so tender, his spirit so sensitive, that he was simultaneously and constantly being shattered by the realization of how much of that beauty remains forever beyond human grasp, how much of that divine order is seemingly mocked by the chaotic cruelty, the senseless suffering, the profound injustices that define so much of our mortal lot. He lives now, they say, only in his equations, cold, yes, to the uninitiated touch, but also perfect, eternal, immutable. Equations that will dance with light and reason long after every human heart that loved him, or was perplexed by him, or pitied him, has crumbled to dust. In this, perhaps, lies the true, terrible, and magnificent redemption. Did mathematics redeem Leonhard? Not from sorrow, certainly not from loss, but perhaps, in the end, it redeemed him from the ultimate despair of meaninglessness. In its unyielding structures, in its unwavering logic, in its ethereal, transcendent beauty, he found a truth that, however cold, however indifferent to his personal agony, was undeniably, irrevocably real. A truth that pointed, however obliquely, towards something enduring, something magnificent, something terrifyingly sublime, beyond the chaotic, ephemeral flux of human affairs. His mathematics, born of that singular, extraordinary mind, forged in the crucible of his immense suffering and his equally immense joy in discovery, is a gift of pure, untainted order to a desperately disordered world, a testament to the human spirit's defiant capacity to find, or create, beauty and meaning even in the deepest, most profound darkness. In my dreams I see him still, a blind old man, adrift in a vast empty room, always with a child on his lap, illuminated only by the fierce, unwavering light of his own intellect. He is calculating the curvature of space, the nature of prime numbers, the ultimate destiny of the stars, while silent tears, tears I never saw him shed so openly in life, fall like relentless rain onto pages he will never, ever see. "I found God in the mathematics, Friedrich," he confessed to me once, his voice a low whisper, fraught with a strange, unsettling mixture of reverence and profound, unutterable fear. I touched the hem of his garment in the elegance of a perfect proof. But God was not what I expected it to be. The shape was beautiful, yes, terrifyingly beautiful, the beauty of an infinite, intricate, perfectly structured self-similar abyss. Its logic is divine. Its creations are magnificent. But its silence, Friedrich, his deafening silence in the face of our tears, that is the equation I could never solve. That is the theorem that has broken me.
Dr. Johann Friedrich Albrecht died on April 3, 1790, at 86 years of age. This diary, its pages softened by tear marks, was found beside his bed. Tucked within its final entry was a single, much-folded sheet of paper. On it he had written, over and over, in an increasingly shaky, spidery hand, a single, poignant, and ultimately unresolved reflection. Sadness is immeasurable in size. Yet beauty endures. And perhaps, just perhaps, in that stark, cold, magnificent endurance, there is a whisper of a terrifying promise. That even if God is not what we expect, an indifferent, terrifying abyss, the relentless human pursuit of truth and beauty is, in itself, a sacred act, a defiant song sung against the encroaching silence, a single candle lit in the face of an infinite darkness.